What would you do if someone threw away your chronically ill daughter's medically prepared meal? Not by mistake, but because it didn't look pretty enough for their HOA picnic? Would you stay quiet, or would you burn their rulebook down by the line? My name is Dr. James Wilson. I'm the director of the county health department. And 3 months ago, I thought I was giving my 16-year-old daughter a fresh start. Instead, I walked her straight into a perfectly landscaped war zone. This is not just a story about a meal. It's about a neighborhood ruled by appearances, a woman who mistook power for righteousness, and a teenage girl who, despite chronic illness, would teach an entire community what dignity really looks like. We moved into Riverside Meadows thinking we'd found peace. Quiet streets, waterfront paths, a place where I could grieve my wife in private. And Emma, my daughter, could maybe find a few friends who understood her invisible battles. But what we didn't know, what no one told us, was that this pristine little suburb had a rot buried just beneath the mulch. And at the center of it all was a woman named Deborah Simmons, the HOA president. She didn't break the law that day because she didn't know better. She broke it because in her mind, people like Emma didn't belong in her vision of a perfect community. But here's the thing about perfection. It doesn't survive contact with the truth. So buckle up, because what started as a ruined lunch ended with resignations, hospital beds, community revolt, and my daughter launching something that would change lives across the state. This is how one teenage girl's ruined picnic sparked a reckoning. You ever look at something so perfect it almost feels off? That was my first thought as we drove past the brick archway of Riverside Meadows, a quiet neighborhood nestled between a winding river and a forest that looked like it was photoshopped straight out of a real estate brochure. Freshly mowed lawns, flower beds with color-coded symmetry, mailbox posts all painted the same dignified gray. Even the birds sounded polite. After months of grieving, paperwork, and job interviews, this was supposed to be the calm after the storm. I had just accepted the role as county health director, and with it, a promise, to finally give my daughter Emma something resembling stability. 16 years old, straight A student, and probably the only teenager you'll meet who codes for fun and reads FDA policy guidelines before bed. She's also living with Crohn's disease and several food allergies so serious even school cafeterias look like landmine zones. It's not easy being her dad, but it's the greatest honor I've ever had. So yeah, when we pulled into Riverside Meadows with our U-Haul and a car full of low-sodium snacks, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is where she finally gets to just be a teenager. Spoiler alert, that dream lasted about 2.5 weeks. Now, if you're still watching, do me a quick favor. Tap that like button, drop a comment if you've ever tangled with a power-hungry HOA, and don't forget to subscribe, because what's coming next, you're not going to want to miss. Anyway, back to our first day. We met a few neighbors. Smiles all around, fruit baskets on porches. Someone even brought over a candle labeled "Welcome to Paradise." But Paradise, it turns out, had a queen, Deborah Simmons, the HOA president. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but Deborah wasn't just in charge of the neighborhood. She was the neighborhood, or at least she thought she was. You know the type. Early 50s, platinum bob, voice like lemon water with a twist of condescension. She greeted us with that smile that's all teeth and no warmth, like a Southern belle crossed with a parking enforcement officer. "Welcome to Riverside Meadows," she said. "You'll find our community thrives on harmony, order, and mutual understanding." I should have known then. Whenever someone emphasizes harmony, what they really mean is conform or else. And so, our perfect new beginning came with fine print we hadn't read yet. But we would, because underneath the tulips and picket fences, Riverside Meadows wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a performance. And if your kids' needs didn't fit the script, well, you were about to learn just how sharp a suburban smile could be. Coming up next, how my daughter's medical condition became a violation of community standards, and how one picnic turned into the beginning of a war we never saw coming. You know that saying, give someone a clipboard and they think they rule the world? Well, Deborah Simmons had more than a clipboard. She had a title, and worst of all, she had time. See, in most neighborhoods, the HOA president is someone's retired uncle who just wants to make sure the trash bins get pulled in on time. But Deborah ran Riverside Meadows like it was the Vatican meets the White House, with a touch of Real Housewives. She wasn't elected. She was installed. 6 years on the throne, unchallenged. The last 2 people who tried to run against her, one mysteriously ended up with 8 noise violations in 1 week, and the other had a lawn so non-compliant they had to resod the entire thing in the middle of July. And get this, she didn't just enforce the rules. She rewrote them, added clauses so vague they might as well have said, if Deborah doesn't like it, it's banned. She even had a newsletter, the Riverside Standard, filled with pastel fonts, stock photos of golden retrievers, and passive-aggressive reminders about neighborhood cohesion. At first I thought I was just being paranoid. Maybe I'd seen one too many HOA horror stories online. But the signs were there. Russell remembers, like how she would always swing by unannounced while we were unpacking, offering friendly reminders about mailbox height or trash bin placement, while somehow never acknowledging the giant oxygen tank delivery sitting on our porch, labeled with Emma's name, or how she greeted other new residents with brownies, but handed us a laminated pamphlet titled Community Appearance and Outdoor Dining Expectations. I still remember Emma's face when she saw it. She looked up at me and said, "Dad, is my lunch going to get us fined?" I laughed it off, said no way, but deep down, something twisted in my gut, because the truth is, I wasn't sure. And for the record, if you're still with me, thank you. These stories aren't just entertaining, they're real. So if you've ever had a run-in with a neighborhood tyrant, hit that like button, drop a comment and tell me about it. And make sure you subscribe, because the next part, it's when things go from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. Because the moment Deborah realized Emma didn't fit her perfect vision of Riverside Meadows, she didn't just look the other way. She next, how my daughter's safe, medically compared meal became a threat to the visual harmony of a neighborhood potluck. Yeah, it gets worse. From the outside, Emma looks like any other 16-year-old girl. Bright eyes, quick wit, the kind of kid who can debug code faster than I can unlock my phone. But what you don't see is the pain. What you can't see is the battle she fights every single day. Emma was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when she was 8. At first we thought it was just a sensitive stomach or stress, but then came the hospital stays, the vomiting, the joint pain, the terrifying weight loss. I remember one night, she was 9, she looked at me from a hospital bed and whispered, "Daddy, is my body trying to kill me?" That's the kind of question that shatters you. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, like a drip through concrete. On top of Crohn's, Emma has severe food allergies. Wheat, dairy, soy, nuts. Basically, if it's served at a typical American cookout, it might as well be poison. Now imagine that, but you're in middle school. Pizza day? Nope. Birthday cupcakes? Sit in the corner with your safe granola bar. Sleepovers? Not unless Dad packs an emergency cooler and triple checks the kitchen. And yet, through all that, Emma grew stronger. She didn't hide from it. She owned it. She started a blog for teens with invisible illnesses. She taught herself how to code meal planning software. She even testified at a local school board meeting about allergy-friendly lunches. At 14. But here's the thing. Raw ad courage? People still don't get it. Because when you live with an invisible illness, you constantly have to prove that you're struggling. You get side eyes when you bring your own food. You hear she looks fine to me. Or worse, isn't that just an excuse to eat special? And sometimes, that disbelief doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people standing right next to your picnic table. Be like Deborah Simmons. Now, if you're a parent or someone living with a chronic condition, you already know how exhausting this is. And if you've ever felt dismissed, disrespected, or made to feel like your health makes other people uncomfortable, I see you. Emma sees you. Take a moment. Hit that like button if this resonates. Leave a comment if you've had a similar experience. And subscribe if you want more stories that speak truth to power, because yes, it matters. And speaking of power, that brings us to the moment everything changed. Because no matter how brave Emma was, no matter how careful we were, no one could have predicted what happened at the neighborhood picnic. Every Monday, first shift interception, 14 of the people either swallowed their lunches. Next, quote, the moment my daughter's lunch got tossed into the trash, in front of everyone. It was one of those golden Saturdays where everything feels like it's finally going right. The sun was out. Kids were laughing. You could smell burgers on the grill and sunscreen in the breeze. Emma had even curled her hair that morning. She said, if I'm going to sit in the shade with a special meal, I might as well look cute doing it. I smiled. I told her I was proud of her, and I meant it. She was nervous, sure. Events like this always made her feel different. But she'd come a long way, and this time, we were prepared. We packed her food with precision. Her roasted chicken, low FODMAP veggies, quinoa salad, and her meds in a temperature-controlled cooler. Everything was labeled, sealed, safe. Even the container was cheerful, covered in stickers of cartoon cats and a little post-it that read, "This is safe for me." I had spoken to Sarah Bennett, the event coordinator, days before. She was kind, understanding. Her own son had peanut allergies. She said, "Of course Emma can bring her food. We want everyone to feel included." Thought, finally, a community that gets it. Oh, how wrong I was. The park was packed, lawn chairs everywhere, little kids chasing bubbles, dads arguing about cornhole rules. Emma and I found a quiet table near the edge of the crowd. I set down her meal and cooler, then walked over to add my fruit salad to the potluck table. I was chatting with Robert Harrison, a neighbor who also happened to serve on the regional health board with me, when I heard it. That voice, sharp, sweet, surgical. I simply cannot have this kind of food on display where people are eating. I turned. My stomach dropped. Deborah Simmons was standing by our table, holding Emma's lunch between her thumb and forefinger like it was roadkill and Tupperware. Emma sat frozen, face flushed, lips pressed tight. "It's my medical food," she said, trying to stay calm. "I have Crohn's and severe allergies." Deborah smiled, but it wasn't a smile. It was a smirk wrapped in silk. "Well," she said, loud enough for the nearest picnic tables to hear, "we all have sensitivities these days, but we must think about the community experience. That food looks unappetizing. It ruins the aesthetic." And then he dropped it right into the trash. Just like that. Like it was nothing. Like Emma was nothing. Time slowed. Emma's eyes watered, but she didn't cry. She just sat there, silent, shaking. I rushed over. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Deborah turned, fake surprise. "Maintaining community standards, Dr. Wilson," she said. "That meal was not approved. There are plenty of burgers and hot dogs at the main table." My jaw clenched. "Emma can't eat those. She'll get sick. She could end up in the hospital." "There's fruit," she offered, waving dismissively. "And water. She'll manage for one afternoon." That's when something in me snapped. But not with rage. With focus. The kind of clarity you only get in emergency rooms and disaster zones. I straightened my shoulders. "Mrs. Simmons," I said, calm but firm, "are you aware that what you've just done is discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act? Don't be dramatic, it's just one meal." "No," I said, voice low but clear. "It's a violation of medical accommodation, and possibly food safety law, which, as it happens, I enforce." I paused, let it land. "Maybe, perhaps I should introduce myself properly. I'm Dr. James Wilson, Director of the County Health Department." Deborah's face went pale. The conversation caught the attention of the crowd. I saw phones come out. I saw Sarah Bennett step forward, holding hers at waist height, recording. I could shut this entire picnic down right now, I continued. Based on your food handling practices, I just might. Are you serious? She stammered. Completely. And then, a voice from behind us cut through the silence. He mocked my EpiPen last month. It was Tyler, Sarah's son. You said I was being overdramatic, that allergies were a trend. More voices joined in. You served shrimp at the holiday party without labeling it. You called my gluten intolerance attention-seeking. You refused to post allergy notices after my son's reaction. One by one, the stories came pouring out. Years of dismissiveness, of disregard, of real harm, masked behind Deborah's perfect little HOA smile. I turned to Emma. Are you okay? She nodded. Barely. And just hungry, she whispered. That did it. That broke me, and it lit a fire I had no intention of putting out. Next. When authority meets accountability, how I used the law, the truth, and a few very angry neighbors to begin tearing down the walls Deborah built. There's a strange moment right after you realize something terrible has happened, and your brain splits. One half wants to scream, throw chairs, call the news, and let the world burn. At the other half, it starts making a list. Luckily for Deborah Simmons, I'm a list guy. As I walked Emma to the car, trying to distract her with talk about smoothies and takeout, my brain was already ticking off boxes. ADA violation, public event, medically prescribed meal discarded, recorded statements, witnesses. Deborah had just walked into a legal minefield. In heels. Back home, after Emma was settled with warm food and meds, I opened my laptop and started gathering references from the Americans with Disabilities Act. You'd be surprised how many HOA leaders think the ADA doesn't apply to them. Spoiler, it does. Especially when you're running public events, managing common areas, or denying access based on medical needs. And I knew exactly how to start. Because this time, I wasn't just a parent. I was the director of the county health department. That night, I filed an internal flag to begin an inspection of all HOA food service activity in Riverside Meadows. The picnic, the potlucks, the Bacon Bond holiday events, all of it, now under the microscope. And I didn't stop there. I also contacted a friend, Rebecca Klein, a civil rights attorney who specializes in disability discrimination. I asked her, would this qualify as a legal case if it went to court? Her answer, oh, James, this is a law school exam question, textbook, and she failed every section. Now, let me pause here for a moment to say this. If you or someone you love is living with a disability, and someone dismisses, humiliates, or endangers them under the excuse of community standards, you are not powerless. You have rights, federal rights. And when you know them, you can turn quiet frustration into meaningful justice. And hey, if this story is hitting home for you, smash that like button, comment with KNO you're right below, and make sure you're subscribed because this is just the middle of the story and things are about to escalate. Well, back to Riverside. The next morning I hand-delivered a formal letter of complaint to the HOA board, citing ADA violations, negligence, and unsafe food handling practices. And I added one more line. A full inspection of all HOA-sponsored food events will commence within 72 hours. Please ensure access to all facilities. That got their attention. By noon, my inbox was full. One board member apologized privately. Another said Deborah had gone rogue. But the best message? A subject line from Robert Harrison. It's time. He wanted to bring this up publicly, to call for a special HOA meeting and vote on a full policy overhaul. Change was no longer an idea. It was moving. And so were the people. Findings are fitting, Goldman. Coming up next. What happens when the neighborhood rises up? Asked in residual pain. and the secrets Deborah thought she'd buried start crawling out into the daylight. It had started with whispers. A neighbor walking their dog slowed down near our porch. Another waved awkwardly from across the street, then messaged me later that night. "I'm so sorry about what happened at the picnic. We saw it. We were shocked." By the next morning, the whispers had turned into something louder. Our front steps were covered in care packages, homemade gluten-free cookies, handwritten cards, a bouquet of sunflowers with a note that read, "Emma deserves better than this." Even the cranky guy who always complained about leaf blowers left a container of homemade bone broth with a sticky note. "For healing and justice." It was over, but in the best possible way. Emma, pale from the flare-up and still sore, looked out the window and whispered, "Do you think they're just being nice now 'cause they feel guilty?" I knelt beside her. "No," I said. "They're being nice because someone finally showed them it was okay to speak up. And that's the thing. Deborah had ruled with silence. She didn't need to scream or threaten. She just needed everyone to believe they were alone. That if you complained, you were dramatic. If you pushed back, you were difficult. If you didn't fit the mold, you were expendable." But now, people were realizing that they weren't alone. And Deborah's power? It wasn't rooted in strength. It was rooted in fear. And fear only works when no one talks. Well, people were talking now. I got a call from Sarah Bennett, the event coordinator who had approved Emma's meal. Her voice shook with anger. "I've been quiet for too long. I've got videos, James, emails, voice memos. I started documenting everything a year ago after Deborah dismissed my son's peanut allergy like it was a phase. And she wasn't the only one. Robert Harrison, normally the mild-mannered HOA board member, sent me scanned copies of old meeting minutes Deborah had tried to suppress. Details of past infractions she'd weaponized. All completely petty and in some cases illegal. Within days, a group chat formed. Then a Zoom call. Then a petition. Deborah didn't know it yet, but her reign was crumbling. Not with torches and pitchforks, but with paper trails and policy drafts. And in the middle of it all, Emma, the girl she tried to erase with one thoughtless toss into a trash can. She was becoming a symbol of something bigger. If you're watching this and you've ever felt powerless against someone in charge, someone who abuses rules to hurt, not help, Ruffy in the comments, because I want you to know, the moment one person speaks up, it spreads. And it can reach farther than you think. Up next, the last person we expected to hear from reached out. Deborah's son. And he wasn't calling to defend her. I was sitting by Emma's hospital bed when the message came in. She'd spiked a low-grade fever after the flare-up, likely from stress and missing her carefully timed meal. IV fluids were dripping, the room was dim, beeping monitors kept the rhythm of our long, exhausted night. I checked my phone out of habit. Jason Simmons. "Dr. Wilson, this is Deborah's son. I just heard what happened at the picnic and that Emma's in the hospital. I'm so sorry. My mom doesn't talk about this, but I'm a chef. I specialize in allergen-free and medical diets. I'd like to help, if you'll let me." I stared at the screen. Read it again. Then once more. Deborah Simmons had a son who cooked food for people like my daughter. And not just is specialized in it. You can't make this stuff up. I showed the message to Emma. She blinked, then gave me a look like, "Are we being punked?" I wrote back a simple response. "Thank you, Jason. Let's talk when Emma's home." We met 2 days later at a coffee shop downtown. He was nothing like I expected. Mid-30s, wore a black chef's coat like it was armor, sleeves rolled up to reveal a tattoo of a whisk intertwined with an EpiPen. He spoke softly, thoughtfully, like every word had to earn its place. First, he said, "I need you to know, I'm not here to defend her. I left home at 24 because of the way she dismissed what I do. She called it niche, cooking for weak people, that I was wasting my talents." He sipped his coffee and sighed. She never believed food could be medical, or emotional, or powerful. Then he looked me in the eye. But I do. I've catered for kids with 10 allergies, seniors with feeding tubes, veterans with trauma, length eating disorders. A member of your story? I've seen it before. What I haven't seen is someone stand up to the system like you did. I sat there, humbled, because here was this man, born into Deborah's house of order and image, and yet he'd become everything she wasn't. Empathetic, honest, brave. We talked for hours about Crohn's, about how to design meals that taste good and heal, about how lonely food restrictions make kids feel at birthday parties, and about the power of being seen. Before he left, Jason said, "If Emma ever wants to collaborate, I'd be honored." And that right there, that moment of unexpected grace, reminded me of something I'd nearly forgotten in all the stress. Healing doesn't always come from the people who hurt us. Sometimes it comes from the ones they pushed away. Now remember how I said the community was waking up? Well, Emma was waking up too. But not just from her flare-up. From something deeper. Up next, how my daughter turned pain into purpose and started building something that might just change lives beyond our little neighborhood. Something shifted in Emma after the hospital. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the quiet time hooked up to IVs and Netflix reruns. Or maybe, just maybe, it was realizing that someone had tried to erase her existence in broad daylight. And failed. She didn't say much that first night back home. She just sat on the couch, laptop open, knees tucked to her chest. I asked if she wanted soup. She shook her head. "Coding," she mumbled. I figured she was tinkering with her homework or fixing bugs in that RPG she'd been building since 9th grade. But no. 3 days later she came into my office with a flash drive, a fire in her eyes, and said, "Don't operate near the museum. I want to show you something." It was an early prototype, rough edges, clunky interface, but the idea? Brilliant. A platform designed specifically for people with dietary restrictions. It let users filter by medical condition, allergy, food intolerance, then find recipes, restaurants, support groups, even emergency meal tips. She called it Inclusive Plate. "It's not just for people like me," she said. "It's for parents, caregivers, event planners, anyone who's ever felt scared to eat in public." I was speechless. Not just because of what she built, but because of why. Most kids would have pulled back, shut down. But not Emma. She turned the worst moment of her year into a launching pad for something bigger. And here's the kicker. She emailed Jason Simmons, yes, Deborah's son, and asked if he wanted to join the project. I nearly dropped my coffee when I found out. "You sure?" I asked. "You want to bring him in?" She nodded. "Eh? Gets it?" she said. "And maybe it gives him something to talk about with her." That's Emma. Always one step ahead of my emotional maturity. Over the next month, they worked like a startup team on fire. Jason provided recipes, kitchen safety protocols, and real-life case studies from his clients. Emma handled the coding, UI design, and outreach strategy. They even pitched the idea at the county's Youth Innovation Expo and won first place. News spread. Vocal blogs picked it up. A tech nonprofit offered mentorship. And Riverside Meadows didn't just watch from the sidelines. They showed up. By the time the Community Health and Inclusion Fair rolled around, organized by none other than Sarah Bennett, Emma had an entire booth with QR codes, app demos, and allergy-safe samples cooked by Jason. I stood there, watching her speak to a crowd of families, healthcare workers, and even a few skeptical HOA board members. And I thought, see, this is what resilience looks like. It doesn't shout, it builds. Exposing of your life. It doesn't burn down the house. It rewires the foundation. And as if that wasn't enough of a full circle moment, guess who showed up? Coming up next, Deborah Simmons. No clipboard, no command. Just a woman, standing in the shade, watching the daughter she tried to humiliate become the voice of a community. I saw her before Emma did, standing near the edge of the crowd at the Health and Inclusion Fair, fell behind a booth selling local organic bath salts. No clipboard, No perfectly staged pearls? Deborah Simmons, wearing a plain navy dress, no makeup, hair pulled back like she'd lost the energy to control the narrative. She looked smaller, not physically, but like the air of authority around her had deflated. And for once, she wasn't holding court. She was watching Emma, listening as my daughter explained how a simple QR scan could show every allergen in a dish and recommend substitutes in seconds. She didn't interrupt, didn't roll her eyes. She just stood there. And then something I never expected happened. Emma noticed her. I tensed, waiting for the scowl, the glare, the stormy teenager response. But instead, Emma wheeled herself right over, cool as a cucumber, calm as a nurse with a full shift and no time for drama. I watched from a distance, half proud, half panicked. Couldn't hear their words, but I could see the body language. Deborah trying to find her voice. Emma, letting her speak. Then Emma pulled out her phone, showed Deborah something on the screen. They talked for a minute more. Then Emma smiled. Small, tired, but real. When she came back to our booth, I couldn't help myself. What on earth did you just show her? Emma shrugged. The beta login for Inclusive Plate. You gave Deborah Simmons access to your app? She's trying to make things right with Jason, she said. They haven't spoken in a while. And, well, she knows a thing or two about presentation. If she wants to test the user interface, why not let her? I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or high-five her. So I did the dad thing, nodded slowly, and said, "That's very mature of you." Emma smirked. "You're welcome." Later that evening, back home, I found the envelope. No return address, just for Emma. Inside, a handwritten letter. Neat cursive. Unmistakable signature. Dear Emma, I cannot undo what I did, but I can choose to learn from it. I confused perfection with worth, order with kindness, and in doing so I hurt you. I'm sorry, not just because I was wrong, but because you were right to stand up. Thank you for making me see what I refused to look at. Deborah Simmons. No excuses, no qualifiers, just a real apology, the kind that doesn't erase the past, but maybe, just maybe, makes way for a better future. Emma read it once, then tucked it into her journal. Didn't say much, just whispered, "Maybe some people do change." And I thought, maybe she's right. Up next. As fences fall and rules are rewritten, what's left behind isn't just a better neighborhood. It's a lesson in dignity, difference, and the quiet power of standing your ground. A few weeks after the fair, I was watering our tiny herb garden. Yes, we have one, mostly for show, but Emma insists the basil smells like hope. When she stepped onto the back patio with a look. Not the teenage, I need money look. Not even the I broke something and I need you to fix it look. It was different. "Dad," she said, sitting next to me, "I've been thinking. That sentence never ends calmly, ever. I want to leave Riverside Meadows." We put down the watering can, let it sit in silence a moment. "Because of what happened?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, because of what's changing." It surprised me. "I don't want to stay here just to prove something," she said. "We fought, we changed things, but now it's time to move forward. I don't want to be the girl who is hurt forever. I want to be the girl who did something, and then kept going." She said it so clearly I didn't even have to think. "You're right," I told her. "We've done our part. And now it's time to let this place grow, without us." A few days later the for sale sign went up. And you know what? It felt free, like cutting loose an anchor you didn't even know you were dragging behind you. We said our goodbyes. Sarah hugged us like family. Jason promised to keep sending new recipes for the app. Even Deborah showed up, quietly placing a thank you card in our mailbox. No speech, no attempt to reclaim the spotlight. Just a gesture. And then, just before we pulled away for the last time, Emma turned around in her seat and looked out the window. You think they'll be okay? She asked. I smiled. They've got better leadership now, and a community that finally knows how to listen. She nodded once, satisfied, then opened her laptop and dove back into app updates like it was just another Tuesday. As we drove off, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Same clean sidewalks, same manicured lawns. But something felt different. Because when you take a stand, when you demand respect, not just for yourself, but for everyone quietly suffering in the background, you don't just change policies. You change the culture. You break the invisible chains. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. If this story moved you, Bo Om Diosi, if you've ever stood your ground or wish you had, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful real stories, and drop a comment with one word. Unchained. Because your voice matters. Just like Emma's did. Just like yours still can. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.